We've been living this socially distanced, lockdown, quarantined existence for 6-8 weeks now, as we're recording this due to COVID-19. And I know many people besides me are craving connection through more than virtual meetings. And there's even, I saw a couple nights ago, a new emoji on Facebook that is incorporating art to portray that feeling of care and connection. I mean, as a global community, we crave actual human interaction. And even here, how long have we been doing these remote recordings for the podcast, Amy? Like 2 months?
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Mm-hmm. It is. And we're all learning some new avenues in communication, innovation. A word that we're hearing a lot right now is pivoting, turning towards opportunities that may include relational contact, business shifting, or even medical ingenuity. One of the most authentic ways that humans have connected is through social elements of words, games, and art. And today we're going to tie all three of these together as we answer the question, what is the social impact that human beings need for positive survival? And we've invited several guests to the table. We've got Nick Cravotta and Rebecca Bleau of Blue Matter Games.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Welcome to you two. Please tell us what you're doing right now.
Thanks for having us tonight.
Hi.
So part of our biggest projects are we're helping lead the charge for immersive experiences. Those come out in the form of, say, like an escape room where you're part of a story. You actually become part of the game. You follow a story, work with other players. They're much more than just a regular game. They're something you can fall into, like a book or a movie. In fact, in some cases, we're calling them a movie in a box.
Yeah, they're experiences when you come together and sit around the table and then you drop into another place. And so we've been working a lot with that, and there's a bunch of new projects that are coming out soon for us.
We're also focused across the spectrum of games, but preschool games or pre-preschool games are something that we're very interested in because they teach adults how to interact with children. For those parents, for example, that don't know, I remember when my kid first showed up, and that was the second baby I'd ever held in my life. Didn't really know how to play with it, and learning to play so that my child became a he rather than an it.
And then another thing we've been looking at is what we call duet games. So they're games, especially kind of in the COVID environment, you don't usually have a large group of people that you can gather together with. And it's also very stressful times. And we have noticed through our community that not everybody wants to compete against each other. And so we're coming forward with games that two people can play that are not competitive, that you work together to win a game.
The idea is you both come home from work, you're both tired, and the last thing you want to do is beat each other. It's a lot more fun to sit down, have a drink together, and play together.
And then on our property, we live on 10 acres here, so as well on our property, we're building giant spirals and gnomes and ladders and trees.
You all sound like the complete package. And I'm so excited to talk to you a little bit more, especially about this idea of dual games, non-competitive, and these preschool games. I think that's one of the things that I've heard as an educator, that a lot of parents are having a difficult time pivoting, becoming child's teacher now. And so having something like preschool games and teaching parents how to interact with their children, I think is spot on. That's awesome.
One of the things is with our preschool games is that we're trying to have it where they're not learning games. It's not about a parent teaching a child. It's about interacting as two people.
And a journey together.
And that's a key part of how we approach game design and game play is you're interacting and there's respect for each other as individuals.
I love that. Colin, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say I've done an escape room with someone. But I've never thought about doing that. I guess what you're talking about is you're bringing an escape room into your house, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tabletop experience. So as opposed to most escape rooms are $25 to $50 a person. So a family of four is looking at $100 to $200 to go out for a 45-minute experience. we're selling it in a box.
Yes.
Our latest line is coming out at $20. You get an experience for the whole family.
For 4 to 6 people, for $20.
For an hour and a half to 2 hours for $20.
I love that.
Much, much more affordable. And rounding out this conversation is the creator of Pictionary and the recent author of the book Game Changer, Rob Angel. Rob, tell us what's keeping you busy.
I was not hoping with the COVID to slow down, but that's not happening. I am launching in 3 weeks a book about my experience with Pictionary. It was a 5-year journey writing the book, and it kept changing, but it was really pretty fascinating to relive the stories, things I hadn't thought about. I talked to friends. Do you remember this? No, but here's what I do remember. So it was a really interesting, fun project to relive it all, really relive it all, not just write it down. And so that's coming out on June 1st, launching on Amazon and taking up a lot of really great time and going to market that. And I'm doing a lot of speaking. I want to share my journey and my story and hopefully inspire some entrepreneurs and inspire people to follow their dreams and maybe even find their passion to find their dreams.
That's amazing.
I look forward to learning more about your journey tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I learned about Nick and Rebecca from the title of one of their games. It sounded so much fun, and it's similar to our podcast, Holland, the Afterword. And their game is called Afterword. And so I was looking at it because I'm doing some pivoting myself as an educator, trying to do things online. And so I found them. And Holland, remember you said, why don't you talk to them, see if they'd like to be part of our podcast? And that afternoon, Nick calls me right back. So it was such a pleasure. But I'd like for you all to share a little bit about how you started Blue Matter Games and why you went into this field.
Fundamentally, play is an essential part of our relationship. We play a lot of games in our lives, and life itself is a game. Many of the ways that we interact with each other, we are very playful and change those interactions. Our very first game started when our son was about 4 or 5 years old, and my brain just didn't want to sit there and play with stickers. It wasn't that fun. So I tried to come up with a game that I could come up with the stickers. And my game was to make a game and then have him place the stickers. And that actually ended up being our game Acuity, which is with Fat Brain. But that was our very first experiment was building that game together. And then a friend said, why don't you sell that? Hopped on a plane to Toy Fair. And
I think that's the key, is to take the mental leap to go, you know what, why not hop on a plane to New York Toy Fair and go walk around and see what's there.
It's pretty experience, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I didn't know that you had to know people and that you had to make all of your appointments before you went. I just showed up.
Yeah, I've had incredible power in my life for not knowing I couldn't, and so I did. And that's kind of the crux of how we got started too. We didn't know that you just couldn't just do that. And so we did, and now we're like 80 games later.
Yeah.
I love what you said. And people say, you broke the rules. Well, don't ask what the rules are.
Exactly.
Then you won't break them. That's exactly what you guys did. I love that.
Yeah, I remember approaching Ravensburger, which is one of the largest German companies, and the inventors relations lady. I said, can I meet with the right person? She said, do you have an appointment? I said, no. Can I have one? And it flustered her so much that she said yes.
Awesome.
That is a great story. Rob, what's your journey in Pictionary?
Got a couple of hours? One of the things we're talking about here is pivoting. And when I was a young boy, I watched my father, who was an executive. He was a CEO. He ran a scrap metal company. It was a big deal. And I thought, okay, I want to be my dad. I want to be a businessman. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college and be a businessman just like my dad. Well, halfway through my freshman year, he got fired. So all of a sudden, everything that I thought it was going to be and do was upended. I mean, I'm looking at this and saying, well, that's just not acceptable. I'm not going to be beholden to somebody else's whims to get fired. I'm going to, as we say, drive my own bus. I'm going to be in charge of myself. So I turned immediately and said, okay, what do I have to do to be my own boss? Well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to find a business. And so in college, I changed everything I knew and took entrepreneurial classes and was going to set out after school, after I graduated with, I always brag about this, a 2.9 GPA, but I did graduate. And I wound up into board games. Wasn't a plan. It wasn't something I said, okay, I'm going to make a board game and see what happens. It was like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur. Here's an opportunity. I'm going to go for it. And I did.
That's wonderful. I love that. But you've also pivoted even a little bit more. What you shared a little bit in your intro, and maybe we'll talk about it some more now, but about your writing career. 5 years it took you to write your book?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, it did take 5 years. If you want to call it a career, we can do that. But it was something completely new. I'd never written a book. I got heavily immersed in the process, maybe too immersed in the process, and sort of got really into it. And as the book progressed, I progressed. And it was interesting that I was on a learning journey at that point, a spiritual journey. So I would wrote the book and that, well, I'm a little different now. So I think differently about this message of this story. So I'd rewrite it. And it just kept growing and growing. So finally, as they say, when you're writing, you've never done editing, you just put your pencil down. And that's what I had to do. But I'm really proud of it. And it's the story and how the story of it. I did it. And it's the story how I want to tell it.
That's amazing. It's very interesting to hear that spiritual journey and how we change over time. And seeing it on the page is probably pretty inspirational.
Yeah, thank you. It was. I'm kind of stammering a little bit because it was such an emotional project and took so much out of me, but also put so much into me. So it was definitely a positive experience.
That's wonderful. Well, we're talking about connections, and I've heard the word immersive several times. There's actually a course of study at NYU. It's called Science of Human Connection. And this is the description. It says, the science of human connection reveals that humans are, by nature, empathetic and need to be in close relationships. 2, there is a crisis of connection rooted in a modern culture that distorts our humanity and perpetuates stereotypes, leading to disconnection. 3, the crisis of connection has negative individual and societal effects. And 4, individuals can change the culture through initiatives that address directly this crisis of connection. So Nick and Rebecca, have you seen a crisis of connection? And you've mentioned it a little bit. And so expand a little bit. You shared some about how your games deal with some of that crisis of connection.
I think there is a crisis in connection, and we kind of see it strongly in where there's such different levels on the playing field. So in adult-child relationships, the adult holds so much of the power. And so through games, we really see that you can kind of even the playing field and connect when a child plays at the legitimately where they can trust the fact that what they're bringing to the table is their all, and the parent is also bringing, or the adult is also bringing their all. It's a much more satisfying and connected experience versus sort of this, I'm going to dumb things down and play on some lower level. And so we've seen it when a lot of times teenagers have kind of their own secret language. That's kind of where slang comes from. They're kind of trying to gain that upper hand. But we found that if we can present a place for people to come together and really even that playing field, there's a stronger experience that happens.
There's another way of putting it is that it's where a child and an adult and everybody in between can meet on equal terms. So you'll hear a lot of parents say, oh, I let my child win to build their confidence. And our take on that is that when you purposely lose, you're not treating your child with respect. You're saying that they're not worth showing up for. And when you say, you won, it's not true. There's also the element of I'm showing up and I'm not authentic. I'm teaching my child that I shouldn't show up authentically with who I am. there's other ways of working, of evening the playing field, such as with a handicap. When I would play with, this story is probably worth sharing. I was playing a game with the kids, and Rebecca walked into the room, and she said, "I can't believe you're counting cards against a 5 and 7-year-old." And I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. Skylar's won this one." But she walked into the next game, and she saw how my daughter had followed my strategy of holding back cards, and she set a new record in the game because she had hidden all of these points. And at that point, it was quite clear that by demonstrating how to play effectively, my daughter learned from that. Rather than learning to capitalize on my mistakes, she learned to work with excellence. And I think that's such a tremendous difference. And there's ways of evening the field.
Well, and another good example is one of our all-time favorite games is Goblet Junior, which is a blue-orange game that we purchased many moons ago when my children were small. And it was really interesting to see my 4-year-old daughter challenging 50-year-olds to play a game. And it's kind of like a souped-up tic-tac-toe kind of game. And it was interesting because she had such connection with the people she played, and she basically won almost every game because she was so good at the game. But it was like a clear sense of self when she did it. And I think when you enable people to have a clear sense of self, whether it's somebody like in a Pictionary game, you don't have to know how to draw. I'm not a good artist. Games really put a lot of that to the side. And I think it gives space for deeper connection.
There's also room in games for people to show up with their best. Cranium was an example of that. The theory behind Cranium was there were 4 different categories of gameplay, but you were going to be really good at one of them, and you were probably going to suck at one of them, and you're going to be okay at the other 2. So everybody showed up in an equal way. It's a brilliant game dynamic.
Rebecca, you said something I don't think I'd ever thought about before, and that is that if you call something a game or if you gamify something, people are willing to just sort of jump in there and do it and try, even if they know they're not good at it. But if you call something schoolwork, and there's going to be a grade at the end instead of just a you win or whatever, then people are much less likely to be willing to do anything that looks like they might not know.
Yeah, it's interesting because I art docent a 2nd grade class when my kids were younger, and it's the terrible thing about that internal voice that tells you suck or that you're awful. I had children just with drawing, which you would figure drawing, kids are pretty free with drawing, but already by 2nd grade, I saw children try to get their friends to do the drawings because they had already internalized that voice, that somehow they were bad. And I think you're right. And, by pointing out that with games, for some reason, we are, as humanity, is willing to set that aside.
You bring up an interesting idea here, Holland, about when we design a game, the first thing we start off with is the experience. The rules are the method for achieving an experience. So do we want to create an environment where a bunch of teenagers are laughing together, or do we want to create an environment where they're stabbing each other in the back and laughing about it? What's that actual environment that we want to create? And it's not about the rules. It's not about that dynamics. It's that experience.
First about the experience.
And the first part of game design is what's the contract that we're making with people. When they read the back of the box, we're saying, here's the experience you're purchasing.
That is so good. What about you, Rob? What do you think about this crisis of connection, and how do you think Pictionary has helped to remedy that?
It can't be overblown, the crisis of connection and loneliness that people are feeling. It's just the way it is right now, and it's got to stop, and it's got to, there's got to be help. And Pictionary is excelling at this. There's more Pictionary sales now than there's been in years. It's that connection that people are having over just a fun activity. It's dressed up as a game, but it's really an activity. And the beauty of Pictionary is that you don't have to learn anything to play it. Everybody knows how to draw. Whether you're good or not, it's a different story. But everybody knows how to guess, right? And so people are having this shared experience when they're playing Pictionary. It's an ethereal moment. It's not just words and guessing. It's you're with everybody else, and there's laughter, there's noise, there's touching, there's feeling. All the senses are alive when you're playing a Pictionary game. So you remember that experience. It's not trying to remember the questions in Trivial Pursuit. It's you remember that experience. You can recall that experience because it's a shared connectivity. It's a collaboration. And that's why people have these wonderful Pictionary stories that they remember. I mean, to Rebecca and Nick's point, one of the points, which was great, is that people don't want to be put on the spot. And so when I was doing the Pictionary demonstrations to get started, we knew that we had to get the pencil in people's hands to sell more games. It was that simple. They just had to play the game. So I would stand at the bottom of the escalator at downtown Nordstrom in Seattle, Washington for 10 hours a day with a pencil in my hand and a pad of paper and a game. Say, hey, come on, play my game, play my game. I'd sell 3 or 4 games and I was excited, but I knew I was missing something. I knew something was wrong. And so I talked to my partners and we pivoted from a drawing game to making Pictionary a guessing game. Less stress, less tension, people getting less stressed about having to guess. We can do that. You can't make fun of me for guessing wrong. So then people would come down the escalator and I have a pad of paper up with a pencil, a picture already drawn on it. What's this? Oh, that's a dog. It's a cat. It just engaged them really, really quickly. And it was a big change for us. Just let people be comfortable in something they already know, but we just let them be comfortable at the guessing part. And it was one of the big changes for us.
That is so cool.
That really is. That really is. I would never have. Well, I've never thought about games in terms of the experience being primary anyway. Okay, I have a different question.
Stand at the bottom of an escalator for 10 hours. You will figure it out. I mean, seriously, this wasn't like some genius move where I'm researching what can I do. It was like something is not working because this game is too good for this to be happening. What do I have to do? And it was a collaboration with my 2 partners. We said, what are we doing wrong? And we came up between us and literally our fortunes changed almost immediately.
I think that's the best example of playtesting I've heard, Rob.
Oh, I tell you what, one of the biggest things that we knew we had to do for Pictionary to succeed was sampling. We had to get people to play. I would stand at the bottom of an escalator for hours. I would open the game. I would literally take the game to a bar, open it up, and start playing. And people, what are you doing? Oh, playing a new game that I invented. And they would start playing. I did all manner of things that weren't, by the rules to get those people to play the game.
Wow. I'm going to jump to just a little bit of a different track right here. If COVID-19 had occurred even a couple of decades ago, and certainly if we think back to these pandemics that occurred 100 years ago or farther back in history, we wouldn't have had the technology to keep in contact with others. We wouldn't have had the bandwidth to do what we're doing right here. We couldn't have continued everyday routines like school. So many people wouldn't be able to work from home remotely. But many experts have also said one reason that people are so disconnected today is technology. So it seems to be connective and disconnective. But what do you think? Is technology disconnective or is it a solution to disconnection, Rob?
Oh, man. It's both. It just has to be. Part of it is social. Part of it is economics. Part of it is, how you were raised and where you were raised. Most of us have listened to this podcast. We probably go, well, no, it's probably going to be very connected because I have the technology. I have Zoom and I have all these things that I can stay connected. But if I'm in a place where I don't have this connection, this technical advancement, then I'm feeling left out. I'm being left behind. And so I think a lot of people are feeling, oh, this is great. I can play Pictionary with my friends. I can Zoom cocktail and I can do all these things. And that absolutely positively is a positive without question. I'm doing it and I'm loving every minute of it. But it is also on another level, leaving some people behind and making them feel left out.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly school from home is showing that in some really extraordinary ways. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, I agree with Rob. It's how it's used. My son turns 21 next week, and my daughter just turned 18, and she wasn't able to do school from home. She's kind of a hybrid homeschooler, so she wanted the social connection, so she was able to do drama in her high school, but then she didn't want so much of the social, so she was able to do part of her schooling from home. And so for her, COVID was kind of this natural thing, and she was able to graduate early, which was great. And I've seen kids use it in a way, and I've myself used it in a way that feels very connected. Right before the COVID happened, fortunately, I signed up with Marco Polo with a bunch of friends of ours that we do this big picnic with. And it's really kind of fun because everybody's chiming in saying they wish they could be at family picnic. And so it's this group of people that have gotten together for the last 20 years, and we're all keeping in touch. But then on the other aspect of it is my daughter, who does TikTok, gained 30,000 followers in 4 months. And my niece, who also is on TikTok, has 200 followers in 4 months. And I think something like that, there's no formula for why one person would gain so much attention and another person would not. And I think that could definitely lead to, feelings of not being good enough or that sort of thing. I personally, I don't do much on Facebook for that reason. I'm dyslexic and I don't write a lot because of that dyslexia. And so for me, something like Marco Polo felt much more natural. So I think it's how you use it and the feeling that you have to do it all. I think people really have to put to a side. It's like with learners, how do you learn? Are you a visual learner, or do you learn by reading or whatnot? If people can really kind of take a look at technology and pick, I think people tend to do a little better.
Yeah, I'll put it in different terms. Is I look at technology that are you participating or are you spectating? So if I'm following Lady Gaga and I totally connect with Lady Gaga, I'm following, I know everything about, I'm not connecting. Lady Gaga doesn't know who I am. So I'm a spectator. I may feel a connection, but it's one way. So it's a story that I've created in my head that I have a connection. And that's just the story I'm holding. Connection is when you care who you're playing with. So I can get online and play anonymous games with people, and then I'm just playing the game. But when we sit around a table together, I care who's on the other side of the table. And in many ways, the game is the kind of the excuse for us to get together. Really, we want to be together. It's not that I really want to play a game and I'm just choosing you to do it. Some people may be that way, but I think the majority of people let's hang out together and we'll do this fun thing. And if we are laughing so much that we forget that we're playing a game, that's fabulous.
And when you see those Lady Gaga fans all get together and geek out on Lady Gaga, now that's connection. Yes, that's kind of like a mix.
It's what brought them together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes we think that adults think that there's a crisis with COVID, but a lot of the kids are super resilient and they're okay with it. They like the different pace. They understand how to live in this world better than we do, those of us who are older that are tied to I have to be face to face.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm hearing both of you just talking about how we learn and how we play, and between this collaboration that Rob has been talking about in games. And I love the idea about this being patient versus spectating. That is something that I think is a struggle sometimes. And I think that's the negative part sometimes of technology. Let's end this particular part 1 episode with our essential question. What is an essential element we need to consider as we think about the human need for social connection, how words and play support that need?
For me, the essential element is interaction. It's the fact that we're doing something together. And there's a book, Infinite and Finite Play, that captures this beautifully. Finite play is where we're trying to end the game, and there's a winner. And infinite play is where we want the game to keep going, and we're willing to change the game in order to keep the game flowing. I have an infinite game with my children. If I sit down to play Monopoly, I have a finite game, unless it's with my friends, and then that's just a part of my infinite game with them. And it's that interaction of being with each other. It's the there's a really important word here called witnessing. We're witnessing each other in our lives. Again, this is not spectating. I'm a part of their life. So I'm seeing them. I'm witnessing what goes on for them. I interact with them. It becomes real. It's interconnected. And that's where the connectedness comes from.
And on that, so on the witnessing, so the picnic that we referred to, we call it the family picnic. And we've been doing family dinner for 23 years. And then we do our big family picnic, which has 200 people come to our house every summer for the last 17 years. And what's really interesting is we have children who are now adults that never have a memory of not having this event. And so it's almost like Christmas time to them. And one of the most touching moments was we had our friend's son Milo, who he told us, he's like, family picnic time is my favorite time of year. And so it's this interesting witnessing, but what's also very special about that day is we play these like hardcore picnic games, and we always do a kids round, and so that the adults don't play the kids round, but the kids are always welcome to join the adult round. And we do not, like if the kid joins the adult round, we do not get cut slack. But what's so interesting is we had our friend's son John come back. He hadn't come for a few years as a teenager. He came back as an adult, and he won this game called Balloon Pop. And he was so excited because he's like, when I was a kid, those grown men never cut me any slack, and there was and he won it, and it was just this like badge of honor. He's like, it was almost like a rite of passage for them.
And part of it was that because we had never let him win at 13, when he won at 18, he realized he had deserved it. And he had actually won. There's another story with John, is we played another game called King of the Tarp, where we put out a 20-foot by 20-foot tarp, cover it with soap and water, and you're trying to be the last person on it. And he'd never won that before. And when he came back after 18, I gave him a look, and we said, we're taking Trevor off the mat immediately. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, Trevor's 15. Trevor's really big. Trevor's going to break someone's leg or arm because he's not safe. So the first thing we do is we knock all the unsafe people off. And he says, that explains so much, because we had knocked Nick off the mat because he was going to hurt us. And now he was part of that. He understood that there was safety. We were watching everybody, and now he was part of it.
It was a very interesting time. Yeah.
Wow. That's Holland. I think we need to get on this invitation list. This sounds like a lot of fun. What about you, Rob? What's an essential element we need for connection?
I think it's a feeling of belonging and a feeling of tribe. Nick was talking about, are you a participant or are you a voyeur, if you will, that we want to belong to something. We want to feel a part of something. We don't want to be left out. And when we find those elements, we find those people, I think it really goes a long way. Two examples would be, well, with Pictionary, whether you can draw or not, doesn't matter. Because you're in on the joke. You're in the joke that you can't draw. Nobody can draw. And so it's not like you're on the outside, you're the worst drawer, so you suck and you can't play. You're laughing at yourself. And it's this connection that you're having with this tribe mentality when that game is going on, that it's okay. I can fail and nobody's going to judge me. I can do and say and think and feel anything I want in this moment because we're all in it together. And so it's this wonderful dynamic of these mini games, as I call them. Each word is its own little mini game that you get to celebrate with your partner. But you still have the bigger picture for everybody as well, is to win and lose. So you're still on the same page of what the goal is. And another example for me personally was Burning Man. I've gone to Burning Man several times. Quite an experience, changed my life. But I went one year, and I went really kind of on my own, and I didn't have a tribe, and I didn't feel this connection with the people I went with, and it really wasn't a great burn. It wasn't that I didn't feel a part of it. I felt alone, and it was, admittedly, I'm going to say, partly my fault as well. So nobody shunned me, and nobody said you can't join. So I don't want to give that impression at all. But it was my own, within myself. And it wasn't a great burn. It wasn't feel connected. I didn't feel like I belonged there for some reason, even though I know I did. So I looked at that, and the following year I'd found my tribe, group of friends from Miami, wonderful, wonderful people. And I stayed with them, and it was just a magical experience. And I didn't really do anything different than I didn't do the year before. But now I felt a part of something. I felt this connection with these people, and it just opened up everything. It wasn't just about them. It was about opening up all my senses to go out and explore, because I knew I had the tribe to back me up, that connection with them. And it was just a wonderful way to go. And it's permeated my life. When I look for tribe, and there's many tribes you can belong to, that is a really big part of my life.
Wow. Holland, did you have any idea this was going to be another conversation about philosophy?
Yeah.
Well, Rob, thank you for sharing that. And tell us a little bit where we can find your book. We know how to get your game, Pictionary, but tell us a little bit, because we'd like to know how we can stay in touch with you and where we can get your book.
Well, I appreciate that. You can find me on the usual Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn on The Rob Angel. And you can find the book now on order at Amazon. It's pre-ordered, but it's going to be shipping in a couple of weeks, so it's coming right up. Rob, Game Changer Rob.
Okay.
So it pops right up.
Well, by the time we drop this episode, it'll already be out, so this will be good. How about you, Rebecca and Nick? Tell us about your work and where we can find you.
Best places to go to our website, Blue Matter Games, and the way to remember that is gray matter's the thinking part of your brain, and blue matter's the fun part of your brain.
Oh, that's good.
That's great. Thank you for joining us at the table with Pictionary creator and author Rob Angel and the creative team from Blue Matter Games, Rebecca Bleau and Nick Cravotta, for part 1 of this conversation on social connection and board games. While you wait for part 2 of this episode, make sure to stop by the afterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. That will ensure you're up to date on all the latest information, episodes, guest resources, and links like Blue Matter Games and Rob's book, Game Changer.